All right. Why don't we begin? It's never a great thing to do your first session right after lunch, but welcome back. Thank you for coming back. That's the bad thing. The good thing for me is that the sun spot is not on my. I'm a little bit follicularly challenged, so it's not. But that is a good thing that it's not before lunch. So. We have a great panel today representing three very different entities. All entities are more than 100 years old, which is interesting, but they're very, very different. So we will get to hear from the risk professionals from those three entities. I am, just to introduce myself, my name is Dusan Stojanovic, and I am my former Chief Risk Officer as well as Chief Operating Officer for the Federal Home Loan Bank. So let's turn to our guests and to our topic. On my left, let's start with Beth. Beth Fye is the Director of Risk Management at Omaha Steaks, which I'm assuming is a household brand and a name in the gourmet food space. Just a few things on the company that I got from publicly available sources. It's a privately held company. It was founded in 1917, so more than 100 years ago. It's headquartered in Omaha, of course. And it has roughly 2022 data to 1,500 employees, which swells up, very interesting, to about 4,500 during the holidays, which to be expected. And its annual revenue is between, again, not a publicly traded company, so we don't have exact data, between 450 and 750 million. With that said, I will turn it over to Beth to fill in any blanks I've left and also to add maybe on your role specifically and what you oversee, how the risk function reports up in the organization, anything else you'd like to open up with.
Sure. Well, I started at Omaha Steaks when I was 10, and I've been there 28 years. No, my daughter's 29, so that doesn't work so well. No, but I've been there a long time. I started out in human resources. I handled insurance as part of my duties and compensation and safety, employee health and safety. And then they moved safety and risk management out of human resources to finance in 2001. And so I was asked to move over there. So I was the safety manager for 13 years, reporting to the Director of Risk Management and working with him. I handled all workers' comp, employee safety programs. And then he retired in 2014, and I was promoted to Director of Risk Management. For the first few years, I didn't get to replace myself, which is always fun. But eventually I did. But during COVID, our sales, the wide range of sales you see is our annual sales were about 340 million, and in COVID 2020, it went to 740 million that year. So when COVID hit, we had not had a great Christmas, and we had a lot of inventory left, and boy, it sure got ordered fast. And we went to 24/7 operations for about 10, 12 weeks during COVID. And so it's maintained about 600 to 650 ever since, which is good. So risk management was actually moved out of finance about a year and a half ago back to HR. So I'm back in HR. So.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Andrew Traeger. He is the Chief Risk Officer of John Deere Financial, which is the subsidiary, a financing subsidiary of John Deere. And that's here actually in Johnston, Iowa. It supports the sale of John Deere equipment globally. Globally means in roughly 50 countries. And it has approximately 2,500 employees worldwide, just the financing part of it. And of course, the company itself is publicly traded. Agricultural machinery, heavy equipment was founded in 1837, so nearly 200 years old, in Moline, Illinois. It has 83,000 employees, and its annual revenue is 2023 data, $61 billion, roughly. So with that said, I'm going to turn over to Andrew for some introductory remarks and maybe talk about risk, how it's organized at the company.
Very good. Thanks, Dusan. Great to be here today. Great to have the opportunity to share on this non-insurance panel. I think you will have some questions for us that probably maybe you wouldn't have had for some of the other presenters here today. But yeah, a little bit about me and a little bit maybe more about John Deere Financial. As Dushan mentioned, we're based here in Johnston, Iowa, so about 15 miles from where we're sitting right now here on the Drake campus. It's an organization that, the reason we exist is to help sell and finance the sale of John Deere products and services. And as mentioned, we as John Deere Financial, we operate in over 50 countries around the world. And we do that in various business models. We have a number of banks that are regulated by central banks such as Luxembourg, Brazil, India, China, Argentina. We have partner banking relationships in a number of our operations where it's maybe more of a white label type product where we'll go to market and say it's John Deere Financial, but really it's a third-party bank behind the scenes. And then we also have a few true 50-50 joint ventures with partner banks, one in France and one in South Africa. So it's a lot of different unique business models, a lot of different unique risks in just the way we go to market. But again, our role to help promote the sale of Deere equipment. We do help finance under our current business model about over 95% of what John Deere sells around the world. So we're not quite everywhere where John Deere equipment is sold, but almost everywhere. Myself, I wear kind of two unique hats. One is the Chief Risk Officer, and a role that I've had for the last 7 years here at the organization. I now am starting my 27th year with John Deere, and all of my time has been with John Deere Financial. My background is actually accounting and finance. So I'm a CPA. I started in public accounting at Deloitte & Touche. Found my way to John Deere as one of my audit clients. It's how I got to know the company and I got to know the people, the culture, the risk appetite from an organization standpoint. Just was a good fit for me personally when I joined the company, and I had many different accounting and finance roles, including Chief Financial Officer for about 6 years prior to the role I'm in now of, again, first piece, Chief Risk Officer, which is really why we're here today. But the second piece, I'm actually responsible for our international businesses. So everything that's outside of the United States and Canada, from a full business perspective, I also have responsibility for. So I have to ensure I'm wearing a risk hat at the same time wearing at times a sales and marketing hat for our to support our global operations. So it's a little bit more about me.
Okay, that is an interesting dual position. And also on the panel today, we have representing the university space. Vanessa Macro is the Chief Administrative Officer at Drake University, our host. Just a couple of pieces of data. It's a private university. It's established 1881, so almost 150 years ago. Endowment, this is 2022 data, is about 250 million. Its budget, yearly budget, about 140 million. It has a total staff of more than 900 people and about nearly 5,000 students. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa for some additional comments on introductory.
Thank you, and welcome to Drake University for those of you who are able to be here today. So appreciate you being here and this great conference. So a little bit about me. I too came to this role through human resources. I am a graduate of the Drake Law School, graduated there in 1992, did some private practice, and then went in-house counsel for Meredith Corporation here in Des Moines. And in that role, I really dealt with employment, labor, and benefits law, some contract law as well. But as a result of that, my professional career really started in HR. And so became the Director of Human Resources at Drake in 2001. Over time, I've been promoted internally and really grateful to serve on the President's Council currently, reporting directly to the President. And my responsibilities are varied and diverse. I'm responsible for facilities, public safety, human resources, environmental health and safety, Title IX, risk and insurance, and our contracts with our third-party food vendor and our third-party bookstore vendor. So there's a lot there. but certainly important to all of that is risk and compliance. And we also don't have an in-house counsel at Drake, so I often serve as liaison between internal constituents and our outside legal counsel. And I've been in this role about 10 years since President Martin first came to Drake and elevated this role. Really created what used to be a vice president of business and finance into an operational side, which is me, and then a financial side, which is the finance department. So again, welcome to Drake. Happy to be here.
Thank you. So let's begin, and I'm going to start with a question that usually risk professionals get usually at the very end. So let's start with the question about what keeps you up at night as a risk professional? You know, whatever you want to call them, unknown unknowns, black swans, fat-tailed events, anything that is on your radar that you would pick to open up with as the big concern. Whoever wants to start. Okay, let's start with Beth.
I guess I can go. So what keeps me up at night is the level of inventory that we build throughout the year and we have right now to get ready for this season. We do 47% of our business for the year in November and December. So we hire close to 3,000 temporary employees to come on and help us. So just having an unplanned fire or event involving our inventory, or if our distribution center were to go down about middle of December on our busiest shipping days. So we put some mitigation plans in place in case that happens as part of our enterprise risk committee, backup generators and things like that. So
a lot of third-party risk there.
yes.
Andrew?
Maybe I'll go. Yeah. The one thing that does keep me up at night is a 15-year-old daughter. But from a risk professional standpoint, you know, it's just really, it isn't just one thing, right? It's the ever evolving and how fast emerging risks are just coming at us. I reflect on a story of back in 2019, I had one of my risk directors, he was retiring. And on his way out, I asked him, I said, is there a risk that you are particularly concerned about that we aren't spending enough time on as an organization? And his response was a global pandemic. And I thanked him for his feedback, and it honestly was like, yeah, that's crazy. You know, that can't happen. And then 2020 obviously happened. But that, you know, was certainly, as a risk professional, the types of things that, you know, we need to be constantly thinking about. But what one thing, it's hard to put your finger on it, but just certainly cybersecurity and those threats continue to evolve on a daily basis. New technologies, artificial intelligence, which I know there's some additional conversation here later this afternoon on that, how incredibly important that is already, you know, to our business. Geopolitical tensions is certainly something that myself and my team thinks a lot about. Certainly, as I mentioned earlier, you know, being a very global business. A lot of things happening in the world that you'd think in 2024 couldn't happen, but they are happening. So it's again, to me, there's just so many new emerging risks. We're trying to understand the ones that we're faced with today, but it's always that next one that you never seem to be fully prepared for is quite frankly where I would lose some sleep.
Hopefully we get to some of those that you mentioned, Vanessa.
Yeah, for me, it is student safety. We look at history, and there's a lot of examples of the kind of things that I would consider, you know, a situation that I hope we never have to face. In 2011, you may recall the scissor lift at Notre Dame, that there were 52-mile-an-hour winds that day, and a student died as a result of being on that scissor lift, videotaping a football practice. We know the Iowa State crew team just a few years ago, their intramural crew team who went out for a practice. Again, high winds resulted in an accident there. So, you know, our activities are so varied, and we want our students to have an exceptional experience. But with that comes a lot of unknowns. You know, we don't know what we don't know. And student safety is at the top of my middle-of-the-night worry list.
Okay. All right, now that we've talked about the big things maybe around the corner. Let's get back to a little more mundane things, such as the nitty-gritty of risk management. So usually risk management frameworks have the identify, measure, monitor, mitigate. So let's kind of try to go through those if we can in a quick fashion. Let's start with identify. So do you have a formal risk management process? And if you do, a formal process that you adhere to? And if you do, does it start? Do you have a risk appetite statement? And how do you use it? How is it arrived at? How often do you revisit it, and so on? Whoever wants to begin.
You want me to start? Okay, sure. Yeah, we do have a very robust, I think, enterprise risk management process, and it does start with a risk appetite statement that we, at least on an annual basis, will update. And again, it's all aspects of our business. And again, from a global perspective, we have a very, I think, well thought out process in a committee structure in place to think about strategic risks, tech and data type of risks, human resource risk, just general operational risks. How we're going to fund our business. We're a lender. We have a balance sheet of about $70 billion around the world. We need to raise capital in order to lend to the farmer customers or construction contractors around the world. How do we manage that asset and liability risk? So an ALCO type meeting. We have a very robust subcommittees underneath them, focusing on different important aspects of our business. And then we have a strong, I think, reporting process that would go up from the committee level up to our senior leadership team, which is president and our senior officers for John Deere Financial, which is our risk oversight committee. Then we take it to our board of directors, which we have being a captive finance company, we have an internal board of directors, and then we ultimately report to the Deere company external board of directors. So there's a subcommittee of that Deere board called the finance committee that we also then report to. So we're constantly using our precious risk resources to do the best that we can to identify the risks, to monitor the risks, then report on the risks at all levels of the organization. So I think it's quite robust, and one that we're never satisfied with, and we're continually looking for ways to improve it. So it isn't just set it and forget it. It's actually something that we are continually monitoring and tweaking as we go.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of pleased to hear that you're never satisfied with it, because I think that's a challenge that we always feel like we have. Our enterprise risk management program really started in about 2014, 2015, we assembled a committee from a variety of departments across campus to identify risks that the university faces. We used data provided by our insurance company as well as our consultants in the insurance space. And then that committee spent an entire year, ranking those risks based on likelihood of occurrence and severity, and came up with a list of 10 risks. We started to request mitigation reports for each of those risks from various constituents across campus and reported that up to our board. And that process has actually now evolved into more of a leadership-driven process, which I think has been helpful because our leadership really needs to have a lens into that. But it is something that we always feel we could do better with. And I know our board audit committee, always asks the question, how are we sure? Kind of to the COVID example, right? How are we sure that these are the risks that we should be developing mitigation plans for? So it is an evolution for sure. And we too had an international pandemic on our list of potential risks in 2019 and did not put it on our top 10 list. So it is a process, but it is valuable in not only going through the process, but creating awareness across campus about the different types of risks that we face.
Our experience is actually very similar to yours, Vanessa, except a little bit more in its infancy. After the pandemic, in 2021, I started researching enterprise risk management through Risk and Insurance Management Society. They had classes, online courses. I started taking some. And in January of 2022, we formed our enterprise risk committee, put together some plans, had a consultant come in and help us put everything together. We met with each of the departments in the company and asked them, what keeps you up at night? What are your top risks? And we put them into a risk register, and then we ranked them based on severity and likelihood, and we developed a heat map. And we actually ended up with about 60 different risks. I had to actually pare that down from about 90, but I kind of combined some things. And then what we did is we put together the committee, which consists of all of our VPs, our in-house legal counsel, myself, and we have an ERM and insurance specialist. And so we met, we talked about them, we ranked, what are the top 5 we want to look at? What do we need to really look at first? So we looked at those, put mitigation plans in place, started working on them, had to get some budgeting, capitalize some equipment for some different things. As I mentioned, a backup generator for the distribution center became high on the priority, which lead times after COVID became very large. So you wouldn't think it would take so long, but it's a little over a year to get the generator in. So it actually is going to be in November or December of this year, but it was a long time getting that process together. But we meet about every 3 months. We take a look at risks. Are there any new ones coming up that people have identified? Okay, what are the top 5? And we're kind of just been going down the list, and each area is responsible for putting their mitigation plans in place, reporting them to the committee. We have other people in other departments come to put their plan, present them to the committee. We meet about 3 or 4 times a year, and that's kind of how we've handled it. When I was doing my research, I actually read that really you don't know what your risk appetite is until you've been in it a little bit. So now that we've been in it, this is like our 3rd year, we're going to probably start developing what actually is our risk appetite, because I kind of have a good general idea of what that is now after a few years of what risk we're willing to take and not take. So
Yeah, that makes sense. In my previous life as a chief risk officer, the risk department, the ERM function, was sometimes teasingly referred to as the business prevention department. And I'm sure many risk professionals have that similar experience. And that connects, of course, to the question of culture in the organization, the risk culture. How do you embed the risk culture? How do you make everybody kind of feel like that they are the risk manager in the organization, and so on? So we've heard a little bit about that this morning in the first session in the insurance CRO. Given the importance of that, and I was going to combine that to one more question that I had, but I want to make sure we have enough time for the audience. My question was on the operational risk and the operational risk incidents reporting. My guess is you probably have all of you have something to that effect. That connects to the culture. How do you ensure that people actually feel comfortable reporting risks in that framework, and that goes to the culture as well? So if you can tie the two together in your answer, I'd appreciate that. So do you want to start now?
Yeah, we've through our safety programs over the years, our employees know that they have to, for example, we expect if there's an accident, they have to report it by the end of the day. So we've kind of developed that culture over time, that if they see something, say something, and that applies to risk management as well. If there's a risk that they've identified within the company, whether it's, it could be business reputation risk. Our reputation is everything at Omaha Steaks. So maybe there's some online comments being made. Our PR department and our customer service will jump on those right away to mitigate those risks. So everybody kind of knows, what affects our business and that they're protecting the business. So, and then those are all reported up through the Enterprise Risk Committee, through the VPs, on what's going on in their areas. So the culture has kind of evolved over time. I wouldn't say we're there yet. There's still, the culture's still being developed as far as risk management goes, but everybody knows that they need to protect the company.
Okay.
Yeah, for us, it kind of does go back to that interesting question of student safety. If it is an issue that has to do with student safety, everyone is on board with that and is really probably looking at risk before I even have a chance to say, have you thought about? Because it is so critical to what we do. We're a student-centered institution. That is who we are. I would say we do that better than anybody in the country. We put our students first. So that culture is really already embedded in any process that might have to do with student safety. So if we're talking about a trip or we require certain risk mitigation plans before a trip is taken for a student organization, for example, we have no difficulty getting compliance with those sorts of processes. What's more challenging is when we're not talking about students or student safety and maybe there isn't an appreciation for why a particular process or policy has to take place. And that's where, you know, having this enterprise risk management system encompass a broad range of leaders is really important because they can help be our eyes and ears and advance that culture. But I too would say, you know, we're not where we need to be there. We need to continue to stay at that. There are some departments that have pretty high turnover by their nature. Athletics is one of those. You know, some of those frontline athletics positions have pretty high turnover, and that's true across the country, not unique to Drake. So you're just having to make sure that you're in front of them all the time, reminding them of the processes that Drake has to mitigate those risks. And so similarly, there are processes for reporting accidents or incidents on student trips involving student intramurals, all those sorts of things, and we get really good compliance on those. It's in other areas like the facilities team or the public safety team where we have to be a little bit more vigilant to make sure that that's the case.
Yeah, maybe just from the Deere & Company perspective, 187-year-old company has lived by a set of core values for that entire time. And, you know, as an employee, you're able to recite them. You understand what that means, and you know it's all about continuing to maintain the brand and what you do day in and day out is a reflection on the company. And I think the company does a great job of really instilling that, and as an employee on day one, and continually reinforces that throughout the entirety of your career. But one of the aspects that was something that really was impressed upon me when I first joined the company was this concept of bad news early. And as an organization that, if you're dealing with a challenge, whatever the case may be, as an employee situation, a financial situation, working with a vendor, a customer situation, is this concept of bad news early is bring in others to help you, manage through whatever that situation might be. Because if you have a situation that you are just trying to deal with by yourself, it's your problem. But if you involve others, it's our problem. And that was a very important learning for me early in my career at Deere. Is sometimes or if you personally make a mistake. Like I said, I came up through the accounting group, and sometimes as an accountant you might make you might make a mistake. You post an entry in error. Those things happen, but don't try to kind of hide that and cover that up. And the best way to really for that to become part of your culture is the storytelling, right? The teachable point of views. And that is, I think, something that the company has done a great job of, is sharing those types of examples along these lines. Just all things that these need to be our problems to solve together. And there's a lot of instances where individuals chose to try to take on something. They made a mistake, they try to cover it up, or they're dealing with a situation that they didn't bring in others to help support. And I can cite numbers of examples and share those stories. They don't work here anymore, because that just isn't part of the culture that Deere has built over time and insists upon maintaining. So, there is a very robust, internal reporting process for as incidents and as things happen, to then close the loop, to do the postmortems on items that have happened. What can we learn from this? Let's try not to repeat these mistakes. And it's just been the tone at the top. At the end of the day, that we've had really strong leadership from the board and from the chief executive officers, certainly during my time, who have been very consistent in ensuring that the core values where we really mean them, and this concept of the bad news early, but bring in others because these are our problems to solve.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned tone from the top, which I think it's sort of one of those phrases we use, but it's a really, really important, a somewhat related thing to the culture and tone from the top is how is risk part of the decision-making process at the top of the house, and is risk empowered to say no potentially to things, which is a big thing. That's what the business prevention department is. And how do you get from a potential no to a yes, but, in other words, balancing the risks and opportunities potentially that you're there to oversee?
Yeah, I'll start with that one. It was part of your question. I apologize. I didn't really address that, but certainly, yeah, the risk department, finance and accounting departments can often be viewed as or business prevention departments. We certainly are really focused on engaging with our businesses to try to find solutions that can work. How do we find a way to say yes? And again, being just from the pure lens of a John Deere Financial standpoint, when a customer will come in and apply for credit, they want to finance a tractor and a sprayer and a combine, and it's literally millions of dollars in purchases of equipment for a central, or Midwest United States farmer. These are significant capital investments that they're making. And we certainly, as John Deere Financial, we want to be able to say yes. We want to be able to get that machinery and that technology in the hands of our customers. But sometimes, just by looking at the kind of the credit quality, your underwriting process, the answer would be no. We, as a risk department, we help establish kind of that risk appetite statement for the enterprise. And then we have a series of mitigations that we've identified to how do we find ways to say yes. And we, again, as John Deere Financial, being one of the divisions of Deere & Company, we have to look at our own risk appetite and the risks that we will take on our own. And there are times then we will engage the broader enterprise to say, hey, we can't take this risk by ourselves, but can you participate with us? Like the manufacturing side of the business that's making the tractor and making the combine. You have margin. If we can't sell this machinery at risk, how can we work together to solve the solution for the customers? So just an example.
Anyone else wants to chime in on that?
I was just thinking of an example. I don't like to say no, so usually I try to ask a lot of questions and convince them that there might be a better way. An example would be we were looking at repurposing one of our old distribution center into a food safety facility, and it just wasn't designed for that. And that's our backup distribution center that we use during the holidays, and contingency planning, business continuity. What happens if the tornadoes that blew through Iowa too, but blew through Nebraska this spring, 10 miles away from our buildings. So what if it had taken out that building, that we no longer have a backup? Even though that backup couldn't ship everything we need to, it's still our backup. And so the president of the company really started thinking about it, and so now they're looking at building. I think he realized that probably wasn't the place for it, and we needed to really build it somewhere else and build it from scratch. So we're in the process of building a new building. So I didn't say no, but I kind of just convinced him that that wasn't the best use of that building. So
that's the right way. Okay, why don't we take a pause and turn it over to the audience, see if there are any questions for the audience for our panelists. I see many hands raised. So Kevin will start with...
All right. My name is Marshall. I have a question particularly for Andrew. So I'm a direct grad, but I'm from Zimbabwe, and I know John Deere has a big presence there because I remember as a young kid even seeing commercials on TV for John Deere. My question to you is, how does the company manage risk in international markets like in Southern Africa, Zimbabwe, especially like with the drought going on right now in that area and political issues sometimes. So how do you guys do it?
Yeah, thank you for the question. You know, I mentioned in one of my opening comments my responsibilities being the international business and how we have different structures and how we participate in financing in markets, and Zimbabwe in particular. We as John Deere Financial, we don't have an operation that we own. We work with ABSA Bank. So we're helping provide retail financing support to customers in Zimbabwe. We do provide dealer lending to the John Deere dealers that are actually in Zimbabwe. One of the biggest challenges with that country, as you would well know, is the currency risks. Getting money in the country is easier than getting money out of the country. So as you know, part of my role in the risk chair is how we manage our currency exposures. And then ultimately, how do we best support all the farmer customers around the world in markets predominantly across all of Africa. We're using partner banks who have better established roots, I think, in the markets, more access to local capital than what we do. And then one of the biggest things that we manage is those relationships with the banks, because we want them to have, just like we do here, let's say in the United States, we want them to, support certainly the sale of the equipment for John Deere, but understanding they have to manage their risks, and then how do we work with them to structure the right types of products for them to be able to do what it is that we need them to do to sell and support Deere company. So it is, like I said, it's really fascinating. One of the things that I've really enjoyed working for Deere in this, again, being a global company, is the fact that you've got so many unique markets and how to go to market and how to manage those risks. But fundamentally, we're working with farmers, that they're growing food, they're trying to help feed their families, their communities, they're trying to feed the world. And so that's the one common thread, no matter where you are in the world. But certainly the risks are different in a lot of different variables. Thank you for the question.
Hello, Tim Soderholm with Principal Financial Group, and you each talked about top risks, student safety. I'm curious where cybersecurity falls on your risk register, and how do you think about that from a non-traditional insurance type company?
Yeah, and we have next panel is going to be on cyber, so that's what it was going to be one of the questions. And
it's one of our top risks. We have a cybersecurity director that's all he does is cyber risk. And actually, this is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I don't know if it's nationwide or it's just Omaha Steaks, but we've been getting all sorts of little training clips that we have to take coming from our vendor, on cybersecurity and what can happen. And but yeah, he does a really great job, and I work closely with him. I make sure that like cyber insurance requirements are in our contracts. I work with our in-house legal counsel, and so we work on that wording and everything, and I partner with him on what our exposures are. So cyber is at the top of the list, and we really have done a pretty good job, in my opinion, of mitigating it. But what I found is IT people think they always have the best, too, and I'm sure they're not aware. Where all these companies that get breached and whatever, I'm sure they thought they were the best, too. So I try to remind them of that. But we've increased our actual cybersecurity insurance, our cyber insurance, up to each year it seems like we increase it another $5 million.
I was going to ask you about cyber insurance. So you do use cyber insurance?
Yeah, we
do other on the panel as well? Okay.
Yeah, so it is also at the top of our risk register. It's one of the top 5. And the insurance requirements drive a lot of those programs, but certainly it's a very detailed and vigorous process. And we actually don't employ a cybersecurity person on staff. We have outsourced that function, largely because it's such a competitive position to recruit for. And our ability to compete in that space with our salary ranges just was not something we were able to maintain. We had a very strong person in it for many years. When he left, we decided to outsource that, and we work very closely with that firm. Our board meets quarterly. Just to give you a sense, Cyber is the only risk that we report at every audit committee meeting about that risk. So it's definitely top of mind.
That, yeah, rings very true with Deere. That is likewise the one risk topic that is on the quarterly agenda with the Audit Review Committee at the Deere & Company level. Yeah, at John Deere Financial, we have our own Information Security Officer reporting to the enterprise Chief Information Security Officer. That is one of our top 5 risks as well. I think it's still number 1 on our list.
Other questions?
Hi, I'm Chris Kennedy from Delaware Life, Chief Information Security Officer. So Tim and I are just seasoning you guys up for our talk coming up and warming all of you up as well. Tim, like minds already think alike. I was going to ask you to double click a little on the cyber part of this, but I'll then move probably to the number 2 risk. I'd love to learn a little more about how at the enterprise risk management level you deal with supply chain and third-party risk, because that is very, very difficult. I live in the world of that in cyber for the outsourcing part of that in many ways. And how do you know that that key vendor is not going to get ransomwared, as an example?
And that extends to suppliers or subcontractors and so on.
Well, we have a lot of third-party suppliers. We only cut steaks and make burger, and we cut pork, but we don't make our seafood or our desserts or our yeah. So we have hold harmless agreements and contracts in place. When our in-house legal counsel, she came on board 6 or 7 years ago. I met with her because I had a lot of concerns about all the third-party vendors that we were using, and so we made sure we buttoned all those up. Any type of claim or recall that we've had with a vendor, they've handled it. They're responsible for it. We get reimbursed everything we need to get reimbursed. So contracts with third-party vendors are very important. If we're talking about contractors, like people who come on our site to work, we have a very extensive contractor safety program. We have an agreement they have to sign with all the insurance requirements. We make them go through safety training about our safety policies and procedures. We make sure we have all the insurance certificates. I know it's only a piece of paper, but we try to cover our bases on that as well. So really it's through a lot of contracts, and then we have an extensive food safety program with a QA director and all that as well.
Yeah, maybe just from the John Deere Financial perspective, certainly at the Deere & Company level, there's a very robust third-party risk management process, certainly supplier agreements, working with supply management, our legal teams, our information security teams, but specific to the business that I'm responsible and working with is being the finance company. Similar processes. I have a subset within my enterprise risk management team of resources that focus on third-party risk management, looking and helping support contracts that we have supporting our finance business, and then again escalating, raising any issues to ensure that we are protected. But we do a lot of our systems that support the financing of our customers are third-party supported systems, so access to our customer data. We have nearly 2 million customers around the world that would finance with us at any given time. So certainly that's one of our risks, is that third-party vendor, and ensuring that they've got the appropriate controls in place. But to think that they can't or haven't been or won't be compromised at some point, we're not naive to think that that isn't going to happen. But we manage those risks to the best that we can.
Yeah, very similar, not much more to add. We really use that contractual function as a way to try to contractual function, and then vetting. We spend a lot of time during the vetting process for large contracts to make sure we have a really good understanding of both capabilities, and then we make sure that the contract supports that. And I will say our contracting process on campus is decentralized, and people are responsible for their own contracts, but I'm very sort of proud of our culture, and that the bigger, the more consequential the contract. I often get calls and questions about, gosh, I'm negotiating to the contract checklist, and I'm having a hard time with the hold harmless provision, or IT's required language is not being accepted, what's some strategies for negotiation? So it's a little, quite a bit different, I'm sure, than our corporate friends are used to. And so therefore, I think the risk is higher because of that. But we have a really strong culture of collaboration and making sure that those contractual provisions are in there, particularly for those large consequential contracts.
Other questions?
Hi, my name is Anand Darla. I'm originally from India. For the last 25 years, I have been here in the United States and in Des Moines since 2001. And I work for a bank here as a risk and control management officer. In the data management risk includes AI risk models as well. The question here is for you, in the risk management life cycle, identify the risk, measure the risk, mitigate the risk through controls, and then monitor it. So in between, you have another step called like introducing the risk. You have identified a unique risk, and you need to introduce that risk to the business. Like, what are the challenges that you have when you are introducing or making aware that new risk to the business? And what is your strategic approach to for those challenges that you can manage?
So if I understood correctly, the new risk introduction
Sure.
and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I could start. I described earlier, that we've got a kind of robust committee structure in place that then reports up, to higher levels of the organization. Those committees are responsible for ingesting new risks that are identified across the business. And like it's RIT is what we call it, RIT, written risk identification tracking. So as those new risks are identified, we're then bringing them through kind of the different committee structures to say, is this an operational risk, strategic risk, is this technology and data type risk, et cetera, for those then subcommittees to kind of vet these new issues. And then, they'll go through the process of, what is the inherent risk of these items? What level of residual risk? Do we have mitigants in place already to identify, what's that level of residual risk? And then ultimately to help us define on these new items, what is our risk appetite? And, if something is inside of our risk appetite, then it might just stay at that subcommittee level. But it's when we find, risks that are newer that the inherent residual risk is higher than our risk appetite, then that's what kind of forces it up the reporting lines up through our risk oversight committees and ultimately up to our board of directors if deemed, material enough of a risk.
Any other questions? Okay, I will get back to just a few more questions on my list. I had one question for each of you, sort of covering certain risks that we haven't covered. We've already touched on many of them. One of the things that's not on the agenda this year is ESG, DEI, and related things. And I thought that it would be interesting to hear from Vanessa maybe on the Drake initiatives, how the risk area is involved, and I've seen on the website a sustainability initiative related to Drake. So why don't you cover a little bit of that?
Yeah, gladly. We have very clear sustainability goals and initiatives that is part of our university scorecard. And so it's very much a part of who we are. Our board, with respect to investments, has been very clear to take it into account, but not at the expense of investment gains. And so I think that's an example of where we see some of the risk that's presented by external legislation, that may be considered anti-ESG, or in the case of DEI, anti-DEI. But in reality, the actual programs that are being advanced are compliant and are not contrary to what those laws might require. DEI is similar. For many years we have had DEI programs, but they have been focused on creating an inclusive culture and reinforcing the importance of diversity in being a solid institution where a variety of views are espoused. They have not been quotas, and they continue to not be quotas. And so it's sort of like where the rubber meets the road in the legal analysis. We've sort of been there all along, but because there are so many more eyes on these issues today, we have to be very thoughtful about how we talk about them. And so this for us is one of those reputational risk areas, if you will. If we don't talk about them in the right ways, it could be a challenge for us. And so we have the benefit of having a lot of smart people who work here. So, spending some time talking about that and, the difference between inclusivity and quotas, for example, is something that we've done long before this is an issue today. For sustainability and those sorts of issues, there is so many business reasons why that makes a lot of sense. Our solar installations mean that we have a lower utility bill next year. But at the same time, we know that for a variety of other reasons, our students require that of us. And so we need to look to our customer, if you will, to make sure that we are meeting their needs and their expectations for us.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned reputational risk, and that was going to be my question for Beth. I'm assuming a very important risk in your area. So do you want to expand a little bit on the reputational risk and things you do or things you don't do, and what the organization does?
Well,
brand management,
yeah,
I guess.
brand management. We actually don't have any type of reputational risk insurance policy. We've thought about it, but managing our brand is everything. So the food safety is just huge at Omaha Steaks. So we are constantly testing. We have our own QA department. We're trying to make sure that every product that goes out the door is safe for our consumers. So, we also monitor social media. If there's any type of a recall, that's part of our crisis planning team to make sure that we handle it right away and we take care of our customers. So, we have a 100% guarantee. So customers who, order, if they're not satisfied, we'll replace the product or give them another product if they want a different product. So we try to make them whole. So it's just a number of different steps that we take,
Okay, thank you. And I guess my last question, per specific risk, I'm guessing the Andrew talked a little bit about the geopolitical risk, so maybe give him a chance to give us a little bit on more on the international / geopolitical risk that you, I'm sure, encounter every day.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time. Again, being a global company, many global companies are probably here in the room today. You look at the situation in Russia, Ukraine, how unfortunate a situation that is. Those are two very important markets just from a food production standpoint. Deere has been very active in both of those markets historically. Certainly because of the war, we've had to change our how we can participate. In fact, we don't participate in Russia any longer, and our ability to participate in Ukraine has certainly been impacted. But it's, that's one of the certainly most recent examples of a geopolitical risk that was very much on our risk reporting. One of the items that we certainly had, built some plans around, but certainly not to the extent of what ultimately has transpired. And because of the learnings of the last couple of years, it's making us think differently about the different geopolitical risks in the rest of the world. And China is a very important market to Deere & Company for not only just the products that we're selling, but as a supplier. Certainly there's tension between China and Taiwan, and that has an impact on all of the world if something were to escalate there as well. So that's changed, how we're doing a lot more kind of planning and scenario analyses around that situation in particular. But just the world that we live in is certainly very volatile and uncertain. The VUCA world, right, that we live in. And we are definitely changing kind of our approach to how we not only think about and identify these risks, but the types of scenario planning that we do to be better prepared in the event, unlikely, but in the event that some of these things could continue to escalate. So those are now, items that have moved into our top fives that, just 5 years ago would not have been.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our conversation. Please join me in thanking our panel for their insights.